We've had our eye on the Titanic exhibition for a long time, and it just made a lot more sense to do it now that we can't have hands-on exhibits in our space. So it really was the perfect timing. It was available and we've been wanting it, and then the fact that we can't have our hands-on exhibits really allowed us to put it through the entire building. Normally we wouldn't bring in an exhibit like this and have it fill the entire building. We would just do a couple of galleries, but we're doing 3 galleries. And that is because of the hands-off experience right now.
Every weekend since we've opened, it's been sold out. We've had, I think during spring break, we had to turn people away. It's just been an incredible success. So the experts we're pulling from, we were able to find Eriks Garsvo, who is the director at the Owyhee Historical Society. We also were introduced to David Concannon, a deep sea explorer, and he worked along with James Cameron to go down to Titanic. He's actually recovered 3 of the objects on display here personally from the bottom of the Atlantic. For this to be here in Boise is actually a really big deal. This is not an easy exhibition to bring in. It's usually not available, and so we feel blessed to have the ability to bring this to the community and be that space where they can come and see high quality stories and really feel that they're part of a bigger story and a bigger picture. Thank you so much for being with us this evening at the Discovery Center of Idaho. We really think you're going to enjoy this night. Eriks Garsvo is a wonderful person. He has so much put together for you guys. And with that, please enjoy the show, and we hope you have a good time.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Discovery Center of Idaho. My name is Eriks Garsvo, and I'm going to be your tour guide on the Titanic. Today is the 109th anniversary of the sinking of the largest ship in the world in 1912. And I'm going to take you back on board the ship like you've never seen it before. But before we climb on, aboard the ship, we have to start at the beginning, the story. How was Titanic? Why was it born? Why was it built? And all those good things. One disclaimer I'm going to say is, this is a live broadcast, so what you see is live. So, without further ado, the story begins here, Birth of a Legend, with J. Bruce Ismay and Lord Peary having a dinner party on late May of 1908. And their dinner party consisted of talking about trying to rival Cunard's line, Mauretania and the Lusitania. Those are the 2 biggest and fastest ships of the time. And they thought, we need a ship that can do that and more. And the White Star was going to be the company to do it. But instead of going with fastest ship, they're going to go with more luxurious appointments. So they decided to do 2 ships, number 400 and 401. And they would be built by Lord Peary's building firm, Harland and Wolff, in Belfast, Ireland. If we turn here to the large model of Titanic, this is very close to a representation of what the ship, the modeler makers would have made to give to Bruce Ismay and say, this is what your ship will look like, sir, when it's finished. And Ismay approved this idea, and they were very long and sleek ships. They were called the Greyhounds of the Atlantic. Now, Titanic and Olympic were not designed to be the fastest blue ribbon winning ships out there, but they were magnificent in the appointments, especially first-class appointments. As you see, there are 4 funnels on the top. The 3 forwardmost funnels are actual real funnels that vented all that boiler room smoke. The 4th funnel is an ornament, pure there for decorative purposes. There was no use for it, but the Lusitania and the Mauretania had 4 funnels, and of course White Star Line could not have any less. It did, though, vent the excess steam and some kitchen fumes from below, because right below this funnel is the huge engine room here. Kind of give you a rundown of the ship here. We've got the bridge in the front, the crew quarters, the captain's quarters, the wireless room, the grand staircase, the lounge in the middle. We've got a second class boat deck, and then the very stern and the bow are for 3rd class passengers only for boat deck areas. On the end of May of, let's see here, at 882.5 feet long, the ship was a length of around 2.5 football fields, and it was as tall as a 17-story building when finished. It had 20 lifeboats on board, which were plenty, and actually over the amount the Board of Trade regulated at the time. Back then, lifeboats weren't designed to carry every person on the ship and get them to safety. Back then, they thought, well, these ships are sailing through a transatlantic area, the alleyway. There's plenty of ships all the way around all the time. So why need extra lifeboats? The boats were there to ferry to the next ship that came to the rescue of the ship that was in aid there. So they added 20 boats, which included 2 collapsible boats up by the first funnel, and there was even a boat underneath the first forward boat here. So plenty of boats overall. Now, Alexander Carlisle was originally the planner of Titanic. He was in charge of the safety systems, and he got into a big argument with Lord Peary about having more lifeboats. He wanted to have boats all the way down the deck and all that, and of course, Peary goes, well, that's going to clutter the deck. It's going to make the ship look unsafe, and yet the ship is unsinkable. It has watertight compartments, which we'll get into later there. So, without further going on about the model and all about rivet counting and all that, even though this ship did have 10 million of those rivets that held the whole superstructure together, let's actually go back to Titanic. Amazing, isn't it? Titanic, the largest ship in the world, and now being recreated in virtual VR computer game, and that's what you're going to see a lot of tonight. But we're going to start here before we really dive into Titanic. We're going to start here at the bridge. Titanic's bridge, of course, right in front here, and it's divided into 2 spaces. So the very front here is the forward bridge, and that's where the telegraphs were to forward or stern. And then inside there is the wheelhouse. And the wheelhouse is where the ship's compass was, the ship's wheel, and that's where the guy was standing that night when they struck the iceberg there, was in the wheelhouse. The ship's bridge also is in front of all the crew areas here, as I mentioned. And this photo itself here is a photo taken at Southampton on April 10th in 1912 on its maiden voyage. From here, she would depart at noon and sail across the English Channel for Cherbourg, France, where more passengers would be taken on board there. One of the famous passengers that were taken on at Cherbourg was Margaret Brown. History, of course, would call her the unsinkable Molly Brown. After that, Titanic would raise anchor that evening and sail on to Queenstown, Ireland, where the passengers found themselves that morning in Queenstown, outside of harbor. She was far too large of a ship to actually go into port, and more tugboats and ferries brought out, third class and more mail. And that is where this ship gets the RMS Titanic, the front three RMS, and that stands for Royal Mail Steamer. This ship could carry the official English mail, the Royal Mail from England to New York. Otherwise, the ship would be known as SS Titanic, or its sister ship SS Olympic, and that stands for steamship. But when you got the contract for your ship to have the Royal Mail, you advertised with RMS in front of your ship's name, just like the RMS Queen Mary in Long Beach has that, or had that designation. So after the final passengers and mail was put on in Queenstown, anchor was raised that afternoon, and she sailed out into the mid-Atlantic. The next time we would see Titanic would be for 73 years. We find ourselves in the wheelhouse of the main bridge. In front of you is the ship's wheel. In front of that is the compass. And in front of that is the telemotor. That is the only thing remaining on the bridge today. The bridge was the area from which the Titanic was commanded, housing the ship's steering gear, engine order telegraphs, and other essential mechanics to maintain the ship's speed and heading. The bridge was located on the forwardmost part of the boat deck. The officer quarters and wheelhouse were located directly aft of the bridge. All right, welcome aboard the Titanic. Behind me here at the Discovery Center are two rooms. One is the first class accommodations, and the other one we'll see later are the third class accommodations. First class, it was good to be first class, definitely. This room is an example of a parlor suite room. And back then it was said it was first class or no class. And they had two parlor suite rooms on the ship back then, both on B deck. And this room would include a sitting room, a drawing room, bedrooms, bathrooms, and a private promenade. Very ornate. You're looking at around over $100,000 in today's money to afford the parlor suite rooms. Otherwise, you're looking around $3,000 for a normal first class cabin. And each cabin did not have a bathroom. That was not standard of the day back then. So you would share in first class communal bathrooms, and you'd had sinks, and then you had a separate area for your toilets and showers, baths. And in those washrooms, you would have this soap, and this is a actually a reproduction of the original bar soap that was used on the ship. You can still purchase the soap today, and if you want, you could use it. So that's still available, still being made by the same company there. And 1912 was the coming of the end of the Gilded Age. Back when men had separate waiting rooms for waiting for their trains, they waited separately, and everything had its place back then. So it was much different time. So why don't we actually go into an example of a first class room now, and you can see two different ones. This is the parlor suite room in the beginning, and the end is a typical A-deck cabin. This is the private B-deck promenade, which was included in the first class parlor suite, which cost around $100,000 in today's money. Other first class cabins cost around $3,500, unlike the berth in third class is around $350 in today's money. The parlor suites included a parlor room, a sitting room, a drawing room, bedrooms, and bathroom. Other first-class accommodations were typical of a smaller room like this one on A deck. This one is Father Brown's cabin. First class, wasn't it good to be rich back then? Sure was, I would say. Otherwise, your rooms would either be second class or third class. Second class wasn't too far off from first. You still had a lot of amenities, nice. You had wooden beds, things like that. nice dining room. But in third class, you got down to a room like this where you would see the steel bulkheads, the rivets, the piping in the ceiling, and normally the beds were bunk beds and they were steel. And much different back then in different classes there. The men and women for third class were actually separated in the bow and the stern. So if you were a family, you would be separated. Let's see, the men were in the bow and women were in the stern. And they did have communal areas in the forward well, underneath the forward well deck in the bow and the stern, that they could come together, talk, dance, and get to know one another. But other than that, they were separated during their when they went to bed. So why don't we take a look in that third class area? We're going to start off in some cabins down on E deck area, and we're going to go into a communal area, and then we'll see the Scotland Road, which is a very long hallway that spanned the length of the entire ship, and that got crew and passengers easily through from one side to the other side. The third class accommodations were quite a bit different than what you would find in first class. No beautiful woodwork or plasterwork. Here you would literally see the side of the ship, steel and rivets. But the third class area in Titanic was actually quite a bit nicer than other third class accommodations of the day. A ticket price in third class back then cost £3 to £8, or around $40 today. The room we are in is underneath the forward well deck, which is directly below the bridge. Right in front of you are two large cargo hatches. They would be removed, and the cargo cranes above would lower all the luggage and valuables into the cargo hold. The large cylindrical object going through the ceiling to the floor is actually the forward mast of the ship. We are looking directly toward the bow. These stairs would take you down to E deck. Here is Scotland Road, the large hallway that spanned the entire length of the ship. You've made it back up from third class. Welcome to the grand staircase. This picture here is of Titanic's main feature for the first class area, for the whole ship. That's why they called it the grand staircase. It would go from A deck, a boat deck, to A deck all the way down five decks, down to F deck is really the bottom. E deck was the last landing there, but beautiful oak paneling, large bronze cherub here in the center with a large torch light here. And here at the Discovery Center, we actually have, which we're going to show you guys here, the actual cherub, not this one, but actually a smaller one that was on the one of the other landings of the ship. And this cherub was brought up from the debris field, probably came from the aft grand staircase. They had other cherubs there. Each landing had different ornamental motif on each landing. So this one, as you can see, the center chest has a hole there. That was where the electrical wiring came up into the torch there, and a large flame would have been on the top of the beautiful cherub there. And I'm going to read you a newspaper printing that came out in 1912 from Titanic about this grand staircase. And it was said that we leave the deck and pass through one of the doors which admits us to the interior of the vessel, and as if by magic, we at once lose feeling that we are on board a ship, and seem to instead be entering the hall of some great house on shore. Dignified and simple oak paneling cover the walls, enriched in a few places by a bit of elaborate carved work, reminiscent of the days of Gringling Gibbons, collaborated with the great contemporary Vren. In the middle of the hall rises a graceful curving staircase, its balustrade supported by a light scrollwork of iron and occasional touches of bronze in form of flowers and foliage. Above all, a great dome of iron and glass throws a flood of light down the stairway, and on the landing beneath it, great carved panel gives its notes of richness to the otherwise plain and massive construction of the wall. The panel contains a clock. Honor and glory, crowning time. Looking over the balustrade, we see the stairs descending many floors below, and on turning aside, we find we may be spared the labor of mounting or descending by entering one of the smoothly gliding elevators which bear us quickly to any of the numerous floors of the ship, which we may wish to visit. The staircase is one of the principal features of the ship and will be greatly admired as being, without a doubt, the finest piece of workmanship of its kind afloat. Now, wouldn't it be cool to actually walk the staircase from down on F deck and all the way up to the glass dome? Well, you know what? We can. Let's go. We're going to start here on F deck and go all the way up to that glass dome. On each landing, this one being the very last, is a sign on the wall and a clock that told you what landing you are on and what deck you are on the ship. Let's proceed up to D deck. Here on D deck was the reception room where people could gather for afternoon tea, listen to music, and also gather before entering the dining room for dinner. D deck landing was also a place where first-class passengers boarded the ship. The landing of the staircase here featured a large candelabra. Going up to C deck was a location with many first-class cabins. It also was a location of the inquiry office, or the purser's office. Here, you could store your valuables, your cash, jewelry, watches, anything that you did not want to keep in your cabin during the voyage. You could even send telegrams from here. Each landing of the grand staircase featured different ornamental features. This one in the center has a large carved pineapple, flanked by double cherubs on each side holding a torch. Coming up on B deck landing was also an area where first-class passengers boarded the ship. B deck also included many first-class cabins forward and aft of the staircase. Behind the grand staircase were the elevators, or as the English called them, the lifts. The lift would take you from A deck down to E deck, about 4 decks. The lifts had large benches inside them so that the women could sit down while going between levels. Titanic was the first ship to have elevators. Here we see another large carved pineapple in the center and 2 cherubs, one on each side of the staircase. Here we come on to A deck. Outside is A deck promenade. This was an area where you could take an afternoon walk and encircle the entire ship under the cover of the boat deck. When coming in from A deck, you would be met with the main feature of the staircase. The large center chair holding the largest torch on the staircase, along with the clock on the wall and a large glass dome overhead. Taking our final climb up to the boat deck, in front of us we see the famous Honor and Glory crowning time. A wonderful piece of craft carved wood here. As we zoom in, you can see the wonderful craftsmanship. Unfortunately, the entire grand staircase, including this clock, is no longer on the ship today. Everything has rotted away or broke apart during the sinking of the ship. The grand staircase was held in with glue and nails and gravity. When put underwater, the entire staircase lifted out of the glass dome and floated to the surface. Here we are on the boat deck area. After coming in from a walk, you would proceed up to the railing and were able to look down all the way to F deck, where we came from. If you were to look up, you would see the beautiful glass dome and wrought iron, and a large chandelier crowning the center. During the day, natural light came in, and at night, the dome was illuminated by electric light.
Why, yes, I own a couple railroads in Montana. Oh, well, hello. Welcome to the smoking room on Titanic. Yes, this was exclusive for gentlemen only. Back then, after dinner, the men would get up from the dining table, excuse themselves, and leave the women with the children while they go off to bed. And the men would come up to this beautiful, ornate room here with a raised roof ceiling, so you had a larger feel of a room. Beautiful mahogany panels, inlaid mother of pearl, gold leafing, and stained glass windows. It was replicating a gentleman's club back on land, of course. It had red and blue tile floor and tables with special lips on them so that your drink wouldn't slip off in rough weather. And it was definitely a place to be. Actually, it was still a place to be even at 11:40 p.m. 109 years ago. Men were still drinking and smoking cigars when Titanic hit the iceberg. Now, this photo of Titanic's smoking room, really, it does not do this room justice. This has been totally recreated for the game, and we're going to do a nice fly-through of this room. So don't worry, ladies. This time, we'll let you in to see the gentleman's smoking room.
The first-class dining room was the largest room on the ship. Over 500 people could dine in luxury in this immense Jacobean-style dining room. Here we see large stained glass windows with natural light coming through. Behind the windows, are actually a set of double portholes, since we are located quite a bit far down in the middle of the ship here. At night, there were electric light bulbs behind the stained glass that would illuminate them. That way, the window was never dark. On Sunday, church service was held in the dining room. Tables would be cleared and the chairs would be set up for people to attend church service. The large piano accompanied the ship's band during dinner, breakfast, church, and any other events held in this room. For breakfast, you could see sirloin steak and mutton chops, mashed and sautéed jacket potatoes, buckwheat cakes, Oxford marmalade, baked apples, fresh fruit, and Quaker oats. For dinner, you could see lamb and meat sauce, sauté of chicken, filet mignons, boiled rice, Waldorf pudding, peaches and jelly, chocolate and vanilla eclairs. First class, you ate well.
Well, hello. I think you guys just saw the dining room video instead of the smoking room video. So why don't we really quickly talk about the dining room, and then we'll get you to that smoking room. First, we got to eat dinner though, okay? So the dining room was located right here on D deck, all the way back. It was dead center midship here. Double portholes is the giveaway, because on D deck, there are no windows, but the reception room, which you just saw, that whole dining room had huge stained glass windows with natural light coming in from these double portholes. At night, the windows would be illuminated with electric light. These two doors here are actually where first class people boarded the ship on D-deck landing. So you came in here, into the reception room, the grand staircase there, and then into the dining room. And here is an actual replica of the first class china here. And this is a small, maybe salad plate. Not the dinner plate, they were a little larger. But this was a fine china that you would have had in first class while having your breakfast and lunch and dinner. And since you've already, actually, one more thing is that the dining room could sit over 500 people. And they placed it dead center because that would be the smoothest ride available on the ship. So now that you've seen the dining room video and you've seen all the information and history about that, now we're going to come up that staircase here. We can walk along the deck and we'll go inside into that smoking room, which is right here under that fourth funnel there. So now why don't we take a walk and head for the gentleman's smoking room.
Ah, here we are, the smoking room. The room was adorned with beautiful plaster medallions on the ceiling. The floor was red and blue tile linoleum. This room is located on A deck. In front of you are the stained glass windows that are on A deck promenade. The stained glass windows above, the arched ones, are actually the boat deck. This room had a raised roof, giving the room a larger feel. The room in the center here was adorned with beautiful mother-of-pearl inlay, gold leafing, and stained glass windows. Behind was a small pantry and a storeroom for all the liquor. In the center of the room on the far back wall was the only real coal-fired fireplace on the ship. Above the fireplace was a painting done by Norman Wilkerson. called Plymouth Harbor, which hung over the white marble fireplace. Throughout the room, there were tables with raised edges to prevent drink spillage in rough weather.
Ah, the sea breeze, fresh air after that smoking room. Why don't, now that we're on the deck here getting that fresh air, I'll kind of show you around here. Lifeboats. This is actually our second-class boat deck area here. In between these two railings here are actually where the engineers or the crew or the people that worked on the engines, the boilers, that was their deck. That was all they got. It was right in between these two fences. And in front of that, all the way up to the forward area, lifeboats, is where first-class boat deck was. So you could take a deck chair and lounge and enjoy the sun and the sea breeze here under the massive funnels here. And then this raised roof, that's where we came from, the smoking room. So if you walked here as a second-class passenger, you would see windows here. It would be a frosted pane, and inside, of course, are those stained glass arched windows of the smoking room. But there was more to Titanic, if you were first class, than just smoking room, dining room, and the grand staircase. What other amenities could I do as a first-class passenger? Well, there was a couple rooms called the Turkish baths, the swimming bath, and the squash court. So kind of like a tennis court in a way, down on F deck. The Turkish baths were also down there, and so were the swimming pool. They were all right in one deck over above the boilers, boiler room 6. So it's very close to all that nice and warm heat down there to heat the pool and give the steam heat to the Turkish baths. Now these two rooms were exclusive to the first class. You paid about $24 or $27 per person in today's money to use the Turkish bath or the swimming bath. They were open to women from 9 to noon, and then 1 to 4 or 5, the men could use the pool and or Turkish baths. And you would acquire your ticket to go to those rooms at the purser's office or inquiry office on C deck. So why don't we take a stroll down to the Turkish baths and the pool then?
Here we are in the Turkish baths. This room also included a steam room, a hot room, a temperature room, toilets, and a cooling room. There were also ultra-modern invention here called the electric beds that applied heat to the body using electric lamps. This area was exclusive to first class only. The Turkish bath was also located next to the swimming pool and near the third-class dining room. Passengers had to visit the purser's office on C deck to get a ticket. The baths were segregated by gender, available to women between the hours of 9 a.m. and 12 p.m., and to men between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. There was a charge of 4 shillings, or $27 per person for admission. After the Turkish baths, one could walk across the hall and find themselves at the swimming pool, or the swimming bath. This was located on F deck, just above boiler room 5. The pool was open to women from 10 a.m. until 1 p.m. and open to men from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. Passengers had to visit the purser's office to get a ticket. The pool was filled with heated seawater once the ship headed into open ocean. Titanic was also the very first ship to have a swimming pool. I don't know if anyone's watching the time right now, but since we're live in Mountain Time Zone, it is now 9:40 p.m. and around that roughly translates to Atlantic time, 11:40 p.m. So 109 years ago, right now in the North Atlantic, Frederick Fleet is spotting the iceberg. 30 seconds remain in front of that ship to turn the largest ship in the world before it sideswipes the iceberg. The fate with destiny is happening right now. So perfect time in our presentation to introduce these massive propellers here, made of solid cast bronze for the center one. Bronze, the fins, the blades were bolted on to the outer two here. As you can see, the massive size here in dry dock here in Belfast. This photo was taken. And these propellers are going full speed right now on the ship. Murdoch sees the iceberg, tells to turn the ship hard to starboard, run the engines full astern, which means stop, reverse. It said maybe if they wouldn't have stopped the engines and reversed them, they had more power and lost critical time there to turn that ship. But either way, the propellers were shut down. This entire rudder is turned hard to starboard. And why don't we go, well, let's go 109 years ago to the iceberg. Titanic had 3 propellers. 2 were 3-bladed ones, measuring 23 feet and weighing in at 38 tons, while the center propeller was slightly smaller and only came in at 16 feet, but was cast of solid bronze and weighed 17 tons. The rudder has just turned hard to starboard, putting the time at 11:40 p.m. Frederick Fleet in the Crow's Nest has just spotted the iceberg. William Murdoch on the bridge has 30 seconds to turn the largest ship in the world. There you have it, folks. Titanic just sideswiped the iceberg, just enough to pop the rivets, open the hull plating up, and water is now pouring in on the first, second, third, fourth, and the crucial 5th compartment. Boiler room 6 started flooding. The ship could stay afloat with the first 4 compartments, but not 5. After the iceberg hit, Murdoch stops the ship. Some people on board don't even feel the shudder of the iceberg at all. People down in the 3rd class, they heard it all right. People up in 1st class, maybe nothing at all. Andrews heard it. Andrews felt it. The captain comes out. Andrews comes up to the bridge. The captain immediately orders the carpenter to go sound the ship, to go see if everything's all right. The captain looks down on the forward well deck right in front here, and he sees ice chunks broken off from the iceberg passing by. The ship is ordered full stop, and Andrews and the carpenter go down to about F deck where the mail room is, and they find already, in the probably 15 minutes after striking, water in the mail room. Mailmen pulling the letters out, bagging it up, grabbing the bags, getting them out of the water, and water was already filling up. Boiler room 6 was already filled up. The watertight compartment doors were shut all the way down the ship here. By the time the Andrews and the carpenter came back, told the captain about what was going on. It's very similar to what was portrayed in the movie, Cameron's movie there. The pumps they had were no match for the water pouring in. And at this point, she's made of iron, sir. I assure you, she can, and she will. And Andrews said, we'll probably give her an hour or 2 at most. And the ship lasted a little longer than he thought, and it's probably good that it did, since they were able to get all those lifeboats launched. So let's see what's going on the ship right now. After colliding with the iceberg, Titanic took on over 400 tons of water per minute. By 12:25 a.m., Captain Smith has realized the ship is lost and gives the order to start filling the lifeboats. Women and children first, he says. The call for help is received by the Cunard liner Carpathia. Unfortunately, she is over 4 hours away. By 12:45 a.m., 1 hour after the collision, the first lifeboat is launched, boat number 7, only containing 12 people. The first distress rockets are fired at 12:45, and by 1:20 a.m. a total of 8 were fired. The water is up to the nameplate on the bow. Around 2 a.m., the last wireless distress signal was sent. "We are sinking fast. Cannot last much longer," it read. The distress signals abruptly ends as the radio room loses power and the grand staircase goes under. At around 1:10 a.m., the bridge plunges under the North Atlantic. Water comes rushing into Harold Bride at the wireless room that's sending out the Titanic's distress signal, which was SOS. The very first time Titanic, actually any ship, used SOS as a distress signal. He was at his post until the very end. The last signal he sent was, "Cannot last much longer, sinking fast." And the signal abruptly ended. Water came crashing through the dome and passed Honor and Glory, crowning time, at around 2:15 a.m. 5 minutes later, at 2:20 a.m., the ship could not handle that kind of stress. With the stern fully above the water, the steel finally gave way and split right down between the third and fourth funnels. There were still 1,500 people on that ship, and at 2:20 a.m., she finally foundered in the North Atlantic, leaving behind 20 small lifeboats. One of the men in the lifeboats looked down at his pocket watch and said, "She's gone, lads." Only 6 people were saved from the water that night. The water was below freezing. Since it is salt water, it does not freeze at 32, but it doesn't take long. And now all those 705 people had to do were wait. Wait for rescue. Wait for an answer that would never come. Daybreak came at 4 a.m., and the Carpathia finally made its arrival. The first point when Carpathia heard of distress from Titanic, she was 4 hours away. What she found was icebergs all around and 20 small wooden boats. Now, Mr. Ismay was on Titanic when she sailed, and he got off the ship, and that was something he would regret for the rest of his life. He got on a boat when women and children passed away on the ship. But while on Carpathia, he sent a telegram out to New York offices that would state, "Deeply regret to inform you, Titanic sank this morning. Many casualties, more particulars later, Ismay." And that is how the world found out. Newspaper headlines around the world started reading, "Titanic, great loss of life, Some newspapers read that all were saved, and some said all were lost. No one knew what was going on until finally Carpathia arrived in New York City. So I'd like to say thank you to everyone that has watched. I hope you learned something new. I hope you've enjoyed the show. I'd like to thank the Discovery Center of Idaho for putting on the exhibition here. And please come down, reserve your ticket online. I will be down here along with David Concannon throughout the next couple months with other local experts. And I'd like to thank Emily Mahon for putting this on and getting this all together and running our switchboard tonight. Also, I'd like to thank Titanic Honor and Glory, the computer game that is being worked on currently. They've allowed me to use a lot of the video footage you saw tonight here. Again, thank you for watching, and we would like to say good night